Ando, it feels to me like people more than ever before, at least in my lifetime, are afraid of their potential, consciously or subconsciously. That if there is this person we could be, becoming them and going through the trials and the tribulations that will take us to become them becomes scarier and scarier with each passing day. And we look at this person we could be and we have a dream of what our life could be like, right? A lot of people, they want to be rich or they want whatever, but they're afraid of becoming the person they need to become to make that dream come true. What's your perspective?
I don't know if I'd particularly articulate it as a fear of their potential, more so a fear of the process. I was speaking to a really, really old and dear friend of mine. Kind of grew up with this guy, the kind of guy who was like just like good at lots of things when he was younger. Slightly older than me. I looked up to him. Absolute legend. He's gone through a bit of a trial in time in his sort of, I guess, in his adult years. Has really knocked his self esteem, and I think we were having a conversation, just ideating about some business ideas, and it happens to always be the kind of conversations I get into now with everybody. And he expressed a real fear of failure, which was for me remarkable because it's something that I recognize in so many people. I think one of the problems we have with our culture today is our perceptions around failure. And I do understand it, but I've had to sort of retrain myself. Like there are two outcomes. One of them is I attempt something and I succeed in what I'm attempting, so I take the W. And the other one is where I take the L, but the L is not a loss; it's a learning. I win or I learn, and I only fail when I attempt. And I think I found that when people express, I guess, a hesitance into pursuing their dreams, a lot of the time it boils down to not the dream itself, but the fear of failing and a public failure. Like in this entrepreneurial journey, I've had to almost abandon my pride completely. Of a term I use quite often is shaking every tree that moves. Like I've gone to every single person close to me at some point for a handout. And I don't mind if they say no because I'm on to the next. And you know what? If they say yes, I'm probably coming back to them in a few months. And I've just had to abandon that level of pride because I don't have a choice but to pursue what I'm pursuing. Like purpose dictates it, and if I need to rely on my network to do so, I'm going to do that because when my network needs to rely on me, I'm committed to being there for them as well. And yeah, I would say fear is the big blocker. I think pride is a massive aspect of that. You know, you've got social media that where everyone's putting up the best version of themselves. So you're only ever seeing people win. LinkedIn is a great example of this, where it can be quite. Um, I don't want to use the word fake, but it can be quite incomplete. You don't see the whole picture. Like for every success, we could have had 50 failures, and I think you know about loads of aspects of my journey, particularly around if not raising investments or securing grants or even securing deals and going for bids. Like my past is littered with failing forward, and I'm actually quite proud of that. I wear that as a badge of honor.
Hey everyone, I wanted to take one quick sec to talk about a new partner that I am so excited to announce I have on the show, an agency called Untapped. Untapped exists to put your brand in the world's pocket with beautifully crafted, high-impact mobile experiences. They've worked with brands like Barclays, EA Sports, American Express, and even the UK government. They're known for creating powerful apps with intuitive, seamless interactions that drive customer engagement and elevate brand recognition. But it isn't just tech development. Their expertise is bridging phenomenal quality technology with beautiful design to create the highest quality product possible that takes your users on a real journey with you. You may remember Will, the founder of Untapped, from episode 13 of the podcast. If you haven't heard that chat, I highly recommend it because it shows you what kind of no-nonsense, sleeves-rolled-up kind of people he and the team he's built really are, and it reflects in the kind of work that they do. They want to make their clients' work recognized across their industries and drive real game-changing value, something I've personally experienced and appreciated working with them myself. For businesses who want to take this next step in their journey, Untapped can help with everything from tech creation to brand design to product marketing and so much more. All right, the links are down below. Check it out. And now back to the episode. So is the actual fear the fear of the perception others will have of your failure? Like, I find this, I'm concerned that if we don't get to the root of why so many people are not stepping into their potential, we won't be able to encourage them to effectively step into it. So if we understand, okay, it's not I'm afraid of my potential, at least not consciously, it's I'm afraid of the process of getting there. And the process of getting there is my fear of what other people will think of me when I inevitably fail. One of my other guests, Samara, said to me, you have to suck. You have to understand that any transition you make, any change, is going to require a period of suckage at the beginning. You're just going to be bad at it, and you therefore will fail a bunch. Is it not even the fear of failure, but the fear of other people's perception of our failure that's actually the biggest blocker? Because if it's that, we can hyper-target that, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's as simple as that. I think absolutely there is a fear of what other people might think and what other people might feel towards what you're doing. But like, let's be honest, failure has some real consequences. So I've been married, the missus, 13 and a half years now, a long time. Been with her 20 years, highs and lows. We've gone through periods of great abundance. And we've gone through periods where we've looked at each other like, well, where's the rent though? Do you know what I mean? And failure has real consequences when you attempt something. Like the ability to not be able to pay your mortgage for a few months. And we got 2 kids as well. Like the stakes are very, very real. If I was living with like, I don't know, parents or something, and I was on this entrepreneurial journey and I had that safety net, perhaps I'd feel differently about some of the risks I take. But as of now, like I need to feed my children. I need to feed my family. And I think, yes, there is the aspect of when you do something very, very publicly, what people might think. I mean, a lot of us will say, you know, we don't care what people think, but I think on some level, we kind of all do, on some level. But I think there is the very real consequence of that failure. So whilst you're going through that suckage period, what are the ramifications on the rest of your life? What are the sacrifices that you need to make for it? Like we've sold houses as a result of this business thing, and like even till today, like I'm not even ashamed to say that, like, after buying my first house like 21, you know, in uni with my student loan, you know, I was like riding high off that whole like, yeah, I'm on the ladder. Right now I'm renting. Because yeah, and I'm like all in. All my chips are on the table, right? And yeah, we have made sacrifices for it. And if it goes belly up, which it won't, by the way, but if it does, I do have to look around and think to myself, what have I deprived my children of? What have I deprived? What the life I deprived my wife of? Oh, I had a well-paying job before going into entrepreneurship, like absolutely insane to come and do this. So yeah, there is massive consequences to that sacrifice. But I'll ask you though, real quick, why? What took you so long? Like you must have been sitting on this idea of pivoting for a really, really long time. What was your great impediment there?
Belief in myself. I grew up in an environment where I was never encouraged to be anything. What I also was in, as well as that, was in an environment where I had to raise myself. So my family, especially when I moved to the UK, I didn't have much family left. I was kind of left alone, and that was after a lot of childhood trauma from being, age 2 to 9. And that left me in a place where I was hurt. And when you're a child, Gabor Mate outlines very eloquently that a small child is a narcissist. Until you're 7 or 8 or 9, you can't comprehend anything outside of yourself. Your brain isn't developed enough. So when you go through that age, you think it's all because of you and all your fault. You then become, for me, I became a teenager, wasn't encouraged to be anything. So the only frame of reference I had to raise myself, or to half raise myself, was, am I good enough or not? Well, of course I'm not, because look at all these feelings I felt when I was a kid that I don't know how to understand. It wasn't really until about 22, 23, after my first 2 businesses, that I started taking my life into my own hands a little bit. So I was throwing my head against the wall in my first business. That went okay, but we didn't have any real major successes. And then everything after that was failure all the way down. Like you said, failing forward. In a way, what pushed me to get anywhere was failing, going, shit, why did this fail? Being hard on myself, and then going, okay, what's next? And I think the only reason why I didn't so thoroughly not believe in myself that I didn't do anything was because there's some weird drive in me that's made me keep going, okay, what's next? No matter how shit I felt. And so I kind of just kept going and transitioning and pushing and pushing and pushing, learning and trying to give to others. After about 3 businesses, I then went and became an operator, and that's when I got to know you and a bunch of other folks I've brought on the show. And it's where a lot of my most kind of up-to-date network is from. And I still wasn't fully believing in myself because that doesn't just go away. And I think something snapped after the last biggest failure in my life, which was around about last summer. And I just went, why am I not believing in myself? Because over this time, I built up proof points, right? You build up proof externally and internally. You build up proof. Others see in you something. You also see what's going on behind the scenes, right? So what most people don't know is that, like, while I've failed at 3.5 kind of businesses, I've also had another dozen or so stop-start projects in between that, other things. And it's like, eventually something has to give. You combine that with what I'm seeing in my own growth and what other people are saying about me. The only reason I have not to believe in myself is because I'm still listening to a hurt child within me that is experiencing lack. And when that got hit across my face, I was like, what are you doing? That's the big reason why. I kept going for what I thought was easiest, and not physically easiest, but emotionally easiest. So it was much easier for me with a network in entrepreneurship in London and some experience running some events to try to go into entrepreneurship events in London. It still would have been a tough business to make work. It doesn't mean it's not hard work, but emotionally, I didn't have to believe in myself. Okay. Whereas going into content and leadership development and personal development and I'm doing more writing. I write a lot on Substack. Making these big shifts is like, who cares? And if no one cares, is there a point? Because I'm here to serve others. I'm not doing this for myself. So if I'm not well, I'm doing the wrong thing. Yeah. And so in a way, it was a mix of stop not believing in yourself and what sometimes still feels like blind faith. But the only thing I think I'd add a little asterisk in there is it wasn't blind, it was intuition. I started listening to my intuition. I realized I've been ignoring my intuition for a long time. So for example, in that last business, while I was doing stuff on the ground here in London, making sales, like taking sales calls to sponsors for events and things, in my head, I was imagining going around the world and running podcasts with people all over the world. And it was like, can I make this work while I'm doing this business? And I'm like, and then eventually I was like, that's such a stupid question to ask yourself. Of course you can't, right? Because like you said, you're either in or you're not. You have to be all chips down, all in. So eventually something just snapped and I was like, I have to just focus on this thing my intuition has been pulling me to. The challenge with that is I know the end result that I want. I don't know the how. And that's
Okay.
what a vision is.
That's interesting.
A vision is the clarity of details. Once you've achieved what one of my previous guests, Ellie, described as the dream goal. But the vision doesn't construct the how. The mission speaks to the how. The vehicle you build, or the vehicle / platform you build, is that a business, is that whatever, that speaks to the how. The vision isn't the how, it's just the clarity of end details. So I can have the vision and not realize I need to climb a mountain 3 times the size of Everest to get there until I start doing it.
Yeah, indeed. And I don't know if you could add some color to that inflection point where you said things snapped. It'd be interesting to understand, as much as you'd be willing to divulge anyway, what was that catalyst? What was the trigger that invoked that, right, now's the time, this thing that I've been sitting on for a long time, I'm going all in?
So there's only so much I'm happy to talk about. I'm more than comfortable to talk about everything generally, but there's I don't like talking badly about people behind their backs.
Gotcha.
So there's only so much, like, I'm happy to tell my story, just my side of the story to an extent, but to keep it light, it's going to be light touch is basically what I'm pre-framing for you. TLDR, relationship with my previous co-founder in that last business kind of broke down. I didn't protect myself adequately, so I found myself kind of left out on my ass without much to show for it. Having felt like I was all chips down, I brought my network into this thing. I built up a community of about 1,400 people through the events I was running personally. My personal network, my reputation, I brought that stuff in. I brought 5 figures worth of paying clients into the business. Left with basically nothing because contractually I had nothing. Lost some other things I was ideating, working on. It felt like a big loss.
Yeah.
I got a little bit of money from that, not as much as it was worth, not nearly as much as it was worth, and nothing else to show for it. And was concerned that, and I ended up being half right but half wrong, was concerned that other people would see me as the failure. So again, like, the way other people see you, how much are we driven by the way other people see us, right? Is it that I failed, or is it that other people will see me as a failure? Yeah. So will other people perceive me as the reason that this didn't work, and therefore I get like blacklisted from stuff or whatever, which didn't happen. And funny enough, some of the inverse has happened where people assumed the other stuff and the other people were at fault because of what happened and not me, because I had built some reputation that I didn't appreciate enough. But anyway, that kind of broke down. I was left like, okay, what do I do next? And it was right before I was going to go take a few days anyways, to take a break for the first time in ages, and do some spiritual work, is the short answer I'll give for now. And so basically did some soul searching and realized a lot of things about the way I think I now have come to believe the world works, we work as people, the way the universe lines up coincidences, and that we can notice synchronicities within, that we have the self-leader, the inner leader, the wisest us in 10 years from now that knows it's all okay, that is driving us, that speaks to us through our intuition, and so many other kind of points of growth in that realm. Okay. So that's why this podcast is me trying to bridge the gap between practical things, philosophy, psychology, and even spirituality sometimes, or the spiritual, something greater than ourselves.
100%.
Because of this combination, and realized, and the place this left me at was, okay, 2 things. 1, I need to build up a huge platform of people that I can serve. And I want to do it through content because I've been thinking about this type of content for a long time. I actually did it during COVID. Okay. Lost in Searching. So it was originally called The Mindful Leader for a season. Then it was called Lost in Searching for a season. That ended in 2021. And I didn't have the capacity to come back to it. And I think I just didn't believe in my ability to come back to it.
Yeah.
So I have now from a much stronger place, and just put 100% into that as much as I could while working on the rest of what I'm doing. Is that coaching? Is that workshops? Is that other ways I can serve using the skills I have? I have acknowledged, I'm the kind of person, because I've worked with so many founders, where I can reverse engineer what's worked for others, what hasn't, as well as ask myself, what skills do I really want to use that I can use, right? I know what I'm good at, I know what I'm not good at. And I'm not going to waste time throwing my head against the wall, bashing my head against the wall, trying to do things I'm not good at. So that was this tipping point, is like, A, I've got nothing to lose. Oh, and on top of that, for that business, I had quit my job. I handed my resignation. And then a few days later is when things broke down.
Wow.
So that was the other thing, is noticing these synchronicities. I was thinking, all of this has happened at once. Maybe that's for a reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That was the place I was left in. And so I just threw everything at things that I had been daydreaming about for ages, even though I didn't know how I was going to do it. I had to develop some faith that things were going to work if I just put service and I put the value I had for the world ahead of everything else.
Yeah. I think it's, if I'm hearing correctly, you did get to a point where you felt like, well, I've got nothing else. I've got nothing to lose.
Kind of. The thing is, like, you know, I hear what you're saying about risk, because there's perhaps a balance between risk, my internal fears, right? So all of these things are survival emotions. Am I feeling too afraid to take risks? Am I feeling afraid because of other people's perspectives of me? Both of those things are survival emotions. They're just different ones. And risk is something we can understand because it's so physically, it affects us so physically, right? If we don't take risks, we can't reach our greatest potential. However, other people's lives are in our hands and we have responsibility. Other people's opinions of us are also a survival emotion. They're both equally survival emotions. They're just born of different things. One is, you could argue, more fundamental because it's very physical and direct. So risk is very physical and direct. Sometimes I wonder if psychologically our brain actually understands the difference. So something I know very well is that sometimes the brain cannot distinguish physical reality from perceived reality.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why hypnosis works, why visualization works, I'm sure you've heard visualization, the term visualization, and it's getting thrown around a lot more now. And for kind of good reason, it's really powerful. So for example, have you heard this study where I think it was with exercise, weightlifting or something. They had 3 groups. Group 1, lift the weights. Group 2, visualize yourself lifting weights. Group 3, do nothing. Group 3, of course, nothing happened. Group 1, lifting the weights, muscle grew by 24% or whatever, something you'd expect. Visualization only, muscle grew by 23%. I might have botched the numbers slightly, but it's something like that. It was very tiny less, almost exactly the same. The brain, if you're really good at visualizing, doesn't understand the difference. The brain, part of the brain that understands that something's happening in my head and something's happening physically is actually different from the part of my brain where the thing is happening and the brain is responding.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So we can perceive ourselves, I could perceive myself as not being good enough, and it will be true.
Yeah.
If you believe you deserve a seat at the table or you believe you don't, you're right.
Yeah.
For that reason, which is physically unfair, right? There's a lot of injustice in this world and a lot of unfairness. But physically, because the brain doesn't understand that you're being unjust to yourself, we adopt a victim mindset instead. So the risk of I can't pay the bills and the risk of other people might laugh at me, the brain doesn't really get the difference.
Yeah.
Both of them are us not being good enough, quote unquote. And so the logical brain is what we need to use to differentiate, but the brain isn't very good at it. So I'm wondering almost what this cocktail of underlying challenges is so that we can work to overcome them, right? If you were to come to me, I don't know, when did you start this business? How many years ago?
About 5 years ago.
So if you from 5 years ago was to come to me and say, I'm thinking of doing this thing, what do I do next? And I were to have a conversation about your underlying, how you feel about doing it. And risk was to come up, your perception of other people's perception about you was to come up, we'd have to tackle these things differently, physically, for your logical brain to be comfortable moving forward. We would need to tackle them psychologically the same way.
Okay.
For us to be able to move forward. And so this is what I'm trying to figure out is there's a pattern between those that end up being successful and patterns that don't. And sometimes it's just life didn't allow the people that tried to be successful because they had something going on. And I'm wondering how we recognize that, how we address that, how we empower people to move through that.
There's so many themes here, man.
So start where you want to start, because I haven't actually asked you a proper question since that first question, but
there are so many themes here, like, because you're talking about, I guess, the visualization, but also the spiritual aspects. By the way, I just love the fact that you're bringing all of you into this, and I think it's super important to understand that. Like, you are the way you are for a reason, right? And I personally believe that everything down to the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now is down to some sort of higher purpose. There is a reason I've been put on this earth. And you touched on also the fact that you're put here to impact other people's lives. And if you're not walking in that thing which I call purpose, it doesn't just impact yourself, but it also impacts, at least detrimentally, all of the other people that you were supposed to impact positively with whatever you've been created for. And I don't necessarily think it's linear in the sense that it's just one thing either.
Yes.
I'm not trying to imply there's this one thing. I just know we are all here to serve each other. That's something I'm very convinced of. Now, I think there's no way to kind of go into this without talking about my story, right? So I was
please do.
raised in the church, like, as in, my parents came over from Nigeria, having already had 3 children. I was a last born here. I was basically the immigration plan. At the time, that was a really great way to get a British visa. I don't mind saying that now, but the plan worked clearly. And I was raised by them in a home which, I mean, didn't feel to be sort of like deeply sort of Christian, spiritual at the time, but looking back at it now, there were so many different cues that was kind of given. Both my parents died really young, so one of them passed away of a really avoidable sort of failure of the kidney, and that was like 3 weeks before Christmas, and then the next year, within literally almost to the day, within a couple of weeks, my mum passed away of cancer. So myself, 10 at the time, my oldest sibling, 17 at the time, then kind of becomes a de facto guardian sort of thing, but obviously he's not legally old enough to be a guardian. So in order for us to sort of stay together, we had this. I guess you can kind of call him. You can kind of call him an angel now, because he was our social worker at the time, who kind of worked the angles to kind of put our file underneath a pile so that he can age out to 18, and that's how we all stayed together. So you've got like an 18-year-old, 2 in betweeners, and then myself, a 10-year-old, sort of living in this house on sort of like London council estates, kind of just working it out. If you imagine how you was when you was 18, that's who was now sort of thrusted into this world of responsibility. Fair play to him, though. He did his best. We'll put it that way. He did his best. So anyway, so we've got this whole thing of like, yeah, we've got this thing where we were born on these, we were raised on these Christian values, but now we're also surrounded by a community of other families who perhaps our parents might have invested into somehow relationship-wise, who've now kind of come closer to us, and they become our extended family, and they're sort of checking in on us. And I've got this crazy network over London, by the way. It's absolutely great. And it has people that are doing some amazing things in business, great entrepreneurs and all that sort of stuff. And all that's come out of sort of this community of families that have pulled themselves in. Now, my first lick of entrepreneurship is when you do this like 2-week work experience in school.
Sure.
So I did one of those. I was supposed to find a placement. Me being super lazy, I didn't bother until like I think the night before, on a Sunday that I was supposed to be going in. I've called up one of my cousins who basically exists in this network, and I'm like, look, what have you got for me? Is there anything you can do for me? And she goes, wait, I'll call you back. Calls me back half an hour later, come to this address, Just Smart, whatever. I've gone, and it turns out to be a particular individual who I'm still really good friends with to this day. He looks like me, comes from where I'm coming from, speaks like me, within the extended part of this community, and he's running what would have been like a sort of technology startup at the time. And this is years ago, by the way. Like I was 14 at the time, so over 20 years ago. He was running a business called R&B Ringtones. Like shout out Alex Amosu, because absolute pioneer in this. And while I'm there, in that 2 weeks, he wins an award for, I think, Young Entrepreneur of the Year or something like that. Comes in the next morning, all celebrating. And my mind unlocks at that point. It's like I realized that there are people who look like me, come from where I'm coming from, playing at a certain level I just had no exposure to. And I've gone to school now, and I've become this guy selling donuts in the playground. Like I was always known for sort of maths and all that sort of stuff, but now I'm like I know exactly what I want to do in life. I want to be that. Not even necessarily what he's doing. It's like I've seen what he's doing, and I'm extrapolating. I'm applying mathematical reasoning to think. Well, if he can do this, he doesn't have two heads. This is what I can do. And yeah, I guess at that point I'm in school. I'm trying to sell donuts in the playground. I'm selling counterfeit clothing. Like, yeah, don't ask. I mean,
all the things you could possibly
all
find.
the things. But I guess what I'm really doing is I'm just finding my feet. I'm failing a lot at this point, and I know that there is going to be something there later on. Sort of fast forward to sort of finding the missus, or we're sort of high school sweethearts, met in college, and again, one of the things that attracts us to each other is because we would be just vibing off of each other from a vision perspective, and it's so key to run with somebody where there's a match in your ambition. And I think the thing that strikes me about that particular individual, that lady who, like, I owe so much to, is no dream was big enough, or no dream was overreaching, and you could say something that would be ridiculous to somebody else, and to them it was like, yeah, great, how are we gonna do it? And they're saying the same thing to you, and it's so important to run with someone like that.
What does that feel like, just to put a pause in the story, that like finding a person, and this doesn't necessarily have to be a partner, although it's great if it is. It could be a business partner, a friend, whatever, where there's just so much alignment. Like, what energetic did you feel shifted for you when you found that?
I just think it's that idea that it reinforces the idea that nothing is impossible. I think they say, like, show me like your 5 closest friends and I'll show you who you are, right? So there is an osmosis to the relationships you keep, which is why as entrepreneurs it's important to keep mentors around. It's important to keep even other entrepreneurs who were slightly ahead of you around. It's important to do that. And I was fortunate enough to have been exposed to that from a young age, and interestingly, as I've gone on in life as well, and the network has changed, and people have come in, some people have left, you find the vision getting even bigger and expanding, and I guess the world of possibilities is just to the point where the moon is not far. The they say sky's the limit. I hate that phrase. The sky is definitely not the limit. If the sky was the limit, we would not have had the moon landing for starters. And I guess what I'm trying to communicate is the only limitation is your thinking in that sense. And when you've got somebody who's always reinforcing it, always challenging it, so it's not all good. It's like a refinement process, and it's great. It's like iron sharpens iron, right? That's what it is.
Yeah. How much of that do you put down to finding the right person? How much of that do you put down to becoming the right people together?
I was lucky. I was lucky. I don't think by any stretch I was the right person. I've evolved just like she has evolved. But I think what we were is we were the right people for each other at the time to sort of essentially hold each other's hands and grow. So I say I bought my first property when I was 21. That's not actually true. We bought our first property with our collective student loan. That's how we literally finessed the system.
Yeah.
We'd always wanted to do it, but it was the coming together, and you see it oftentimes, right? When two minds come together to achieve something, they're capable of much more than what they would have done if they did it individually. There's a particular scripture that I love. It talks about how one will chase 1,000 and two will chase 10,000, and that's something that kind of we've kind of kept with us. And yeah, it's funny because fast forward 20 years, actually, that same award that Alex won, like I was nominated for, like in this weird sort of comeback moment. And for me, it shows the importance of running with the right people. So Alex is an advisor of mine now. I get his time, which is amazing. Just like, actually, he's probably more of a friend, if I'm going to be honest. But nonetheless, you just got to be around the right people. And
how do you develop those relationships effectively? Because if we meet the right people and we think they're cool, we want them to advise us. There's what the next step is. There's how do I develop a relationship with this person? How do you go about
let me be
relationships?
super clear on something as well. I don't want to give the wrong impression with some things. Alex never once sat me down and brought me in on something like, I'm gonna show you how we're gonna close this deal and how we're gonna sell our business for a multi-million exit. No, he never once did that. But actually, the proximity to that energy was where the power was. It was in observation. It was in seeing things that were done wrong, seeing things that were done right, similar to what you were saying, like learning from other people's mistakes. It was in seeing that empowered me. And actually, we've then done a few initiatives since then, sort of looking at how we can kind of take some, I guess, young guys who might be involved in sort of some South London rubbish, if you know what I mean, and we've done a few initiatives, taking them out of that setting and putting them in the proximity of people who are excelling in business, who are excelling in their professional careers, just to unlock their thinking. And for me, it was a proximity at that point that unlocked my thinking. How did I develop those relationships? I think an easy way as well is trying to be an asset for somebody. So I bear in mind I was working for his company for those weeks. I like to think I did a good job because I mean he still at least has some respect for me. But no, I mean now I can just rock up to his house and like there's a conversation there because I'm of value to them. So like similar to how you could call me to come to a podcast, right? And because you've imparted some value in my life, in my business, I'm more than happy to do that. I almost feel indebted to you. And I think if you lead with value, you're definitely going to cultivate the right relationships.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in here really quickly with an offer for you. Those of you who are a little newer to my work, which is most of you looking at the show's stats, will probably not know that for much of my career, I've been working with people to take more ownership of their lives as a coach, mentor, guide, and educator. This show exists to help people discover and cultivate their greatest inner leader. And that stems from a personal mission of mine. But what does it actually mean? Well, I break this down into 3 things: calm, confidence, and courage. We could all do with a little bit more, at least a little bit more, of all 3 of those things in our lives. But how do we make it happen? Well, that depends on us, on our temperament and our context, and so much more. So I've developed a free tool to help us understand 3 of the biggest things that I've noticed hold us back from those really powerful states to be in: restlessness, reactivity, and resistance. What I help folks do is move from that place into that place of calm, courage, and confidence instead. So you can use the link below to check that out. It's totally free, super simple, quick, and easy to use so that you can get just a little bit of clarity in that regard. And I created it just for this show because I noticed how important it was to overcome exactly those challenges. That's what the show is trying to help you do after all, so why not make it easy for you? So with all that being said, I really appreciate you. Hope you find that useful, and let's get back into this episode. If not me, then who? If not now, then when? That's something you said to me in the lead up to this show. What does that mean to you?
Oh, levels. There are levels to this, man.
Start at level 1 and work us up.
Yeah. Back down to that idea of purpose. Like, okay, so I happen to believe in a greater power. I happen to believe in like a creator that put me here for a reason. I think there have been times where I've missed the train for that reason, but thankfully, like as I say, it's not linear. There are multiple uses for like a tool like me, but then like I have to say yes, right? Like purpose isn't forced on me. I have to be like a willing vessel, and I really hate the idea, right, that there are like people out there that I was supposed to impact positively. And because I was sort of stuck in myself and in my own ways, I didn't that is death. Like like what is the point of me if I'm not fulfilling the reason I'm supposed to be here?
Yes.
How can I leave this earth and there not be a net benefit for my contribution? That is death. So yeah, that's the if not me, then who piece. And I guess if not now, then when? It's just an acknowledgement that there's never ever a good time to get started. There is never a good time, and I'm actually quite fortunate because I was in a pretty well paying job at a really good company, a team that I really liked and that really liked me. I had a certain level of autonomy. I got to travel and do loads of different things as a problem solver and a technologist, creating and designing these systems that actually impacted people's lives in a previous role. I wasn't operating on my purpose though. And when I guess the idea for this business that had been stewing, or the technology rather, I've been stewing over it for some time now. I'm quite fortunate in that I felt like I was told to leave my job rather than, oh my gosh, I got to do this right now because like, yo, I felt like it was almost an act of obedience for me. And because it was an act of obedience for me,
An internal obedience, so like an intuition saying you have to leave this job now. Is that what you mean?
yeah, that is what I mean. Like there's a saying that talks about how the deep calls onto the deep, and I think that is what it was. Like, there's a saying that talks about how the deep calls onto the deep, and I think that is what it was. Like, there's a saying that talks about how the deep calls onto the deep, and I think that is what it was. Like, there's a saying that talks about how the deep calls onto the deep, and I felt that like there was a deep calling within me from God, really, and as part of that, yeah, as I say, because it was a question of obedience. It meant that it was kind of easy for me to do things, and then be detached from the outcome. So if I'm just operating in obedience and what I'm doing doesn't work, well, it's not on me at that point. It's like, well, yeah, cool. I did what I was supposed to do, and I'm kind of still in that place where it's like, well, but it's not really on me. I just need to do what I'm supposed to do and be who I'm supposed to be. And I actually think I'm quite lucky in that sense that I get that. Whereas other people might feel it's all on them. You know, you have to succeed or you're just gonna die and the hole's gonna swallow you up. If I fail, like, well, I did what I was supposed to do. And if everything stops now, I can rest assured that I've still walked a path where I've inspired other people to do some stuff. It sounds morbid, but I could probably die quite happy on that. I've not achieved a fraction of the vision of the big picture. I've not achieved an iota of it, but like I'm content that I've done what I was supposed to do up until now. I've been I've tried to be who I'm supposed to be, and I can rest easy in that knowledge.
One of my favorite sayings is that the best time for anything is now, because nothing else exists except the now.
I like that.
So for you to have a moment where you went, right now is the best time, I feel like I'm called to do it, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And talking about where we started, talking about the survival emotions that hold us back, the risk, the fear of failure, alienation.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the solutions is what overrides that.
Yeah.
Is the understanding that if you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? Because nothing other than right now exists. Right. And so there's a few layers here, right? Like you said, it's the layer of there's no better time than right now. Then there's the added layer of my intuition is calling me to do this. There's the added layer on top of that of I want to leave the world better than I found it. And the longer I wait to do that, the longer I might, or the more people might miss that.
Absolutely.
The more I might miss supporting, helping, serving other people. Do I want, with all those layers, if that still isn't enough, that's a sign there's something else you need to work on. And if that isn't enough, it's okay to still feel those challenges because they're natural and they're human. I'm going to find a way through them. And that's what changes your life, and that's what allows you to change other people's lives. Maybe that's maybe the answer to what happened to me as well. To go back to your question to me earlier, maybe that is what happened, is I just had all these layers on top of each other, and it was just like the wrecking ball was too heavy for the wall not to fall down.
Yeah.
This piece around what if I could help someone and I don't because I wasn't living to my full purpose, right?
Yeah.
Life is change. The definition of life is change because we are in movement, because life moves forward and movement is change of something. So human beings, very stereotypically, as we get older, we get more afraid of change, we get more used to comfort, we get more used to routine, and we tend to fall into what can be a trap of liking it or liking it too much. So in my head, there's an equation. Life is change. So life equals change, like an equation. I also have a separate parallel equation that we, as human beings, we are life. Whether because we're energetic beings, because we're conduits for life, because we are alive, psychologically, or even more philosophically, actually, everything that is happening within our perception.
Yeah.
Right? If we're not perceiving it to happen, how do we know it's happening? Someone else is perceiving it to happen. Okay, but that someone else is alive. So everything that is happening because we are alive to perceive it. Therefore, our life is us. Our existence is life. So we are life. Life is change and we are life. Therefore, we are change.
I might have to check your working out there. but no, I see where you're going. Let's go down the rabbit hole. Let's follow it.
Look, it might sound silly, but
You're definitely speaking to something which I agree 100% with. Like, and I guess it's around adaptability. And you mentioned as human beings, we're always sort of in that motion state, or we're always adapting, always evolving. I think that's 100% true. And I guess the point you stop adapting, you stop learning, you stop changing. Yeah, I guess you're kind of dead.
Yes,
I guess
that's the other half of that first equation. So life is change, stagnation is death. If life is change, then when you stop changing, you're stagnating, and stagnate. What's the opposite of life is death. So stagnation is death.
I agree with that actually.
And so, what does that practically look like? Well, you got me thinking. Maybe what that practically looks like is, as long as I am giving, as long as I am in service, I am therefore affecting change, and I am therefore alive. We know that people who have a strong sense of purpose live much longer, right? You can see a 90-year-old who seems like they're in their 60s, and they're just full of life relative to their age, and they're constantly giving, they're volunteering, or they're still working, or whatever. And then, you'll see someone who went through the rat race, got to 65, retired, did nothing at 65, and very quickly we see a decline of people. Once they stop doing things at 65 and they retire, they don't find anything else, they age so much faster. It's very classic. We see all the time in data. So if life is change, stagnation is death, and we want something that we don't have, we must change. So therefore life is us pushing through to make the change, and us not doing it is us allowing ourselves to die a little bit inside. And if I'm allowing myself to die inside, and my desire is to serve, my desire is purpose, then I've set myself up for failure. So it almost begs a reframe. Is what you want matching up with what you're doing? And if not, what do I need to do? Well, if what I'm doing is stagnating, what I need to do is live, which means I need change, which means I need creation. It's almost I feel like this line of thinking is demanding a calling from people to push forward to create a change.
Bearing in mind though, that change and that pushing forward of, let's say, us as a collective human race, which is all of our responsibilities, right, can happen in so many different modes. For instance, there are some people that are called to be that change, as you say, in that 9 to 5.
Yes.
Like, it's not everybody that's supposed to be an entrepreneur, like pushing the boat out. There's some people that are called to do that, perhaps in the way that they raise their children, and imparting that wisdom onto the next generation. And I think I'm really careful to not laud entrepreneurship as a be all, to define purpose. If you know what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. One of the things I think I've failed to communicate effectively is, like, this is not an entrepreneurship podcast. It just so happens, for reasons we've talked about, and as you know, most of my network is in this space right now. I think, let me contextualize why these questions are so important to me. I'm noticing, and I'm not the first person, I've read about this quite a bit before I figured it out myself. The world is going through a state of increased restlessness. The more restless people feel, and we don't know why, the more you must wonder, well, if we're all feeling a thing, and it's all for a variety of different reasons, or we don't know why, then how are we all feeling? It's almost like, when you see, you hear the term generational shift. Right? It's like, where is the generational shift coming from? The collective human unconscious right now is or the collective field of consciousness is one that is of a state of restlessness in a way that is greater than what we've seen in recent history. That's what I've come to believe. So more and more people, they want something they don't have. More and more people, they envision a life beyond what they can get. We all, like so many of us, we want to be rich. We want to be, I want my house in the beachside in, Europe or whatever. So many people want something so much greater than what we've got now, yet at the same time, smaller and smaller things make us feel restless. It's much more common for someone to get angry and shout at their partner than to go, I didn't love the way that made me feel. Can we talk about that? And you can put that down to people just being egotistic people. But when it shows up more than it ever has in so many different ways, I feel like I see this in everywhere, right? That kind of thing might have happened at home, but when you go to work, you're more polite and sociable. Actually, we've got increased rates of depression, anxiety, suicide and suicidal ideation, greater rates of loneliness, so many mental health challenges, all despite us having more physical wealth than ever before. And the mismatch makes me feel like, seems to indicate that there's a level of unconscious restlessness. And so I think it's worldwide, but it's particularly pronounced right now in the West.
Absolutely.
And so this comes when I come back to us being pushed into a change and us wanting to make a change and us acknowledging when we're stagnating, it's really us acknowledging the difference between reality and expectation, right? If happiness is expectations minus reality. Have you heard that equation before?
No.
Happiness is expectations minus reality. I absolutely cannot be quoted with saying that. That's been said for a little while now. I don't know who first said that. You said if you set the bar too high and you achieve it, that gap is the gap that measures how unhappy you are. If you surpass expectations, you're elated and you feel amazing, right? So happiness is expectations minus reality. Most people superficially take that to mean, okay, we'll set your expectations low. And maybe that is a part of it. But if you don't have ambition, you're not going to push yourself to achieve or to drive.
Yeah.
So I guess to me, it's all this comes down to what is the dream goal? What is the vision? What is the expectation? What is the ambition we set ourselves for whatever that means in our life? So it doesn't need to be, I'm a business person with this fame and recognition and money. It can be, I'm contributing to changing the world through a job that allows me to do it in a way that I love doing it. And I'm also or it could be, I'm a parent and I know I'm raising my kids really well. You will still have challenges that come up. For example, am I effectively raising my kids, right? A lot of us, like, I don't have kids. I really want kids one day. And I'm thinking, okay, when that day comes, will I be afraid? Will I go, am I going to fuck this up? Am I going to hurt these kids or like screw up their lives, not being a good enough parent? And I'm sure you as a parent have been through this because every parent does, right?
By the way, the answer to all those questions is absolutely yes. Absolutely. You're always going to get stuff wrong. But,
exactly. And so this is and so let's say you wanted to be a house parent and that was, the way you the way life was for you. Maybe you want, I don't know, 6 kids and you want to be a full-time house parent for those kids. Is that any less of a purpose? No, you will still want to push yourself to grow and be better within it. So within whatever your chosen field or realm is, whatever your playing field, whatever the stadium or arena is, you still want to show up as ready to perform in that arena as possible. Otherwise, you wouldn't have stepped into it. So everyone has further that they want to go and some purpose that they can help fulfill. And that purpose will change over time, like you said, right? There'll be multiple things over time. All of this line of thinking comes back to this question. If it's not going to be us and it's not going to be now, who is it going to be and when? Because if life has changed, we are the ones living the life. So we must make the change to answer the call that we feel that is that intuition you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And even understanding as well that, to your point about life being change, like change happens regardless of you as well. So even if I don't affect the system, like people's needs are always changing and moving forward. I mean, it's why you can look at the top 10 companies in the world today and they are not the same as the top 10 companies in the world 10, 20, whatever years ago, because needs do change. And I think the useful thing about when you realize that there is a problem to solve, and in my case, when you're under some sort of inspiration that actually I can address X, understanding that now is the time to address that, because that is a problem now, and actually it might be a different set of problems you're called to solve, like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I just think that understanding change for me adds to a certain level of urgency in the present, and perhaps that's how being restless manifests with me. I wouldn't describe myself as particularly patient. I'm working on that one, but gosh, like it's now. It's now. I do this. I have this exercise where I think of I try to think of a business idea every day. It's just to keep the creative juices flowing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice practice for me. Some of them are absolutely comical, by the way. But then
give me your funniest example.
Oh, I don't want to. Oh, I was at a party this weekend. Actually, It was a Nigerian. I don't know if you've ever been to sort of like what we call kind of owambes. But these kind of big cultural, like you got music, you got food, you got outfits. It's just the vibe. It's just the vibe. And typically Nigerian people have I don't know if I should be saying this on camera actually, because this is an idea with legs. I'm going to be honest. Anyway, typically Nigerians would there's this practice of spraying money.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen Nigerian weddings.
Yeah. So the thought came to me and I saw people spraying money, and I saw some other people with party poppers, and they were kind of really well timed party poppers. They would do it to like a music, like a drop in the music or whatever. It was great. I thought to myself, what if you could create a dollar bomb, which is basically you put money in a huge party popper and boom. And it's it's ridiculous, but actually it's got legs. It's got legs. So as you can see, it ranges between like the wacky to the practical, but even understanding that if that was somebody's business, and I really do hope somebody creates a dollar bomb one day. If that was somebody's business, now's the time to do it, right? Like now is the time to create that thing. And the idea yesterday, I'm not going to talk about it because actually it was actually more of a serious one and something that I am probably going to
cool.
Probably going to have to move on, despite it not being. Let's just say it plugs into the wider vision kind of thing. But this is it. It ranges, and understanding change means when you do fall under some sort of inspiration, now's the time.
Yeah.
Don't sit on it.
If life is a ship that is sailing, whether you're on it or not, you want to make sure you're at the dock ready to jump on.
Big time.
Do you think people can miss their window?
Yeah, I've missed a few windows, but I think life is such that you don't have one window.
Okay.
I think to think that a spoon has one purpose, its opportunity is to feed you this meal. No, there's going to be loads of meals, right? Somebody's created that spoon for the purpose of meeting the needs right now, but also meeting your needs tomorrow or the next day. Just I think. Yeah, the idea that you've missed your train and that's it. For me, that's not one I necessarily subscribe to. I've missed trains. I've absolutely. I feel a level of regret for certain things that I was given, and I was given everything I need to impact change, and I didn't.
Do you think that's helped you more effectively impact change now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Being able to reflect on that and going, I don't want that to happen again.
Yeah. I don't know if it's actually a positive thing. Actually, I think there's a negative aspect of, I guess that relentless pursuit of purpose, and I think there is a negative aspect of that. I'm often reminded by the missus, to be fair. Even just I'm not particularly interested in balance, for instance. I'm not. Some people want a work-life balance. I think those people must hate their job. I personally feel integrate. If you love your job, you're never going to work a day in your life, and you need work integration. For instance, you need to find a way of integrating in your life, involving my kids in what I'm doing. I've got 11 and a 6-year-old who at times I ask them to contribute to my startup just to involve them. And it's great. They love it.
Yeah.
They love doing it. They really, really want to get involved. And
I love that.
I have an office that they can, come and do their homework on their way home from school. They can just pop in the office and, pull up a chair and grab a desk and do some of their work. And they're like, I mean, maybe not co-founders, but they're in the ship with me, and that for me is how I find balance, right?
Yeah, they're early employees.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're early volunteers.
Absolutely.
I've got this concept of a mindset of harmony as opposed to balance.
I like this.
We can create harmony within our lives that are relevant to us, right? Everyone's life is different. So my balance and your balance are not going to be the same thing.
Absolutely not.
And so work-life balance that is prescribed tells us that 40 hours is the right thing. Anything outside of that is wrong. And okay, but what if you love what you're doing, or you have goals that are just really ambitious?
Yeah.
Like, should I allow someone else to undercut my ambition?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's also the flip side of, we've tested 4-day work weeks, and sometimes they seem to work really well. So where does the prescription of 40 hours come from?
Yeah.
Well, we know where it comes from. It comes from some law passed in the early half of the US, of 1900s USA, for the sake of something or other. I can't even remember what now. I think the only reason we had a minimum wage was because of Henry Ford or something. Citation needed. I might be misremembering some facts, but like a lot of these things are really old concepts.
Yep.
Human beings used to work all day, every day for certain parts of the year. This is post hunter-gatherer tribes, so agricultural societies. We used to work a lot, like twice a year, and do nothing for the other 8 to 10 months of the year.
Yeah.
We then, earlier to that, hunter-gatherer societies, we'd work every day, but for like on and off, feast and famine. The gathering would take place between the morning and the early afternoon, and then the rest of the day we'd just sit around chatting. Yeah. So are we evolved to work 40 hours a week, every week, consistently exactly the same? We also know women are different to men. Right?
Yep.
A woman's cycle and a man's cycle means that they'll work very differently over the course of a month. Yeah. A man will be pretty consistent every day. Yeah. A woman will have peaks of being way more productive than anyone else, than any of the men, and peaks of needing more rest, or troughs of needing more rest. So we can't all have the same balance.
Absolutely.
We must find harmony within what our body and our self needs. That's the way I see it now.
Here's why I really like that concept of harmony, actually. Because I think of, say, like a professional boxer, for instance, who in the run-up to a match or bout or whatever, he would go into camp. Now, surprise, surprise, that individual cannot do a workday week. I mean, cannot do a 4-day week when he's in camp. He needs to be 100% committed to, even in his rest time, the rest is to optimize the times where he's working.
Like an ice bath and visualization, right, and all these things.
Absolutely. And I think how an individual and it's completely imbalanced, by the way. Everything is tilted towards peak optimization. Same for an Olympic swimmer, for instance. Like Michael Phelps was not doing 4-day weeks, and because they had goals that were not ordinary goals, right? And I think it's so interesting because I know when you speak to a lot of them, yes, they make a lot of sacrifices, but I guess harmony would come in the sense that they've got their whole system and setup kind of working together towards this. There's no conflict there, if you know what I'm trying to say. Their family are aware of their goals and are supportive of it, are extending certain levels of patience to them. And this is an analogy I've used in sort of this startup. There's a time to work and there's a time to rest. And I find that while I'm in Olympic swimmer mode, some people are going to look from the outside and they're going to think, well, clearly you're a workaholic. Clearly, and that's okay if that's what they want to think. But I know what my goal is, and I know my family are on board with that. I know I have harmony with them. I still spend a lot of time, like, in sort of meditative states, exercising, that morning routine, that recharging every single day. I spend a lot of time like seeking God, a lot of time like trying to receive. And for me, that is like, that's the balance for me. If I've got that spiritual aspect, or the I think I want kind of routine, and I've got that.
Yeah.
I'm routinely searching, routinely powering up spiritually. I've got my family that are completely on board with this. For me, that's my harmony. And yes, I put in a lot of hours. I do. And, I'll have a cheeky Netflix episode here and there as well if I want to. And almost guilt-free as well at that point. But yeah, I do work a lot of hours today.
How do you set yourself up for success in doing that? Right? Sometimes people like yourself who are really driven towards something, who work quote unquote work as hard, put in as many hours as you say. Anything that isn't work is guilty and non-productive and wrong and bad, and it's like you can get into with one extreme is not putting in enough elbow grease, the other extreme is being very type A hustle culture with no space. You're describing putting in a lot and carving out the necessary space for harmony. I mean, how do you go about that? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I was having this conversation with a group of founders and investors actually in the last week, and there's a certain level of intentionality to my rest. So I am resting, spending time doing this so that I can perform optimally in my business. I can be the person I need to be for my wife and for my children. So I can serve better. So if I'm watching what was I watching? I watched an episode of something on Netflix, and I started the episode at 12:30. I finished because that was when I just managed to finish what I needed to do. Finished it at 1:30, and it was like I knew I was doing that because it meant that like I could do whatever it is I need to do optimally. Like later on, I'm really quite fortunate that I don't need a lot of sleep as well. I'm super fortunate in that regards. But yeah, everything is intentional, right? It's when I'm with my kids, I might be playing Monopoly, I might be doing whatever. I'm doing that intentionally. And I know I'm doing that so that I can optimize myself elsewhere without sort of neglecting my children. Obviously, I didn't grow up with a dad around in the way that they are. So I can be that for them and then work on my business with no distractions, guilt-free kind of thing. I can do that. And yeah, I think there's an intentionality. Define the goal, and I guess you curate the kind of life that you need to make it happen. My morning routine is, everyone in my house knows what it is. It's quite regimented, and it's kind of taken a long time to get to that point. But yeah, it's really regimented, and I'm doing that because it optimizes my performance mentally and physically. If I don't exercise, it's not just about fitness. There are some real mental ramifications of it as well.
When you describe the athlete earlier, the image, comes to mind of they work really hard every day, sometimes 7 days a week.
Yeah.
But they'll also, after the really intense morning workout, they'll do a period of conscious rest.
Yep.
Where they go into the ice bath and then get the massage and then, I don't know, do whatever else they need to do.
So lucky. Oh.
I know, it sounds, but they're also up at 4:30 a.m.
Yeah.
I remember, was it Michael Jordan, who, there's a story of him, some of his rivals from another team, they're in the hotel where they're all staying, preparing for the game, and they get up at like 4:30 a.m. They're like, we're going to do this stuff because we need to beat this guy. And
he's there.
And
Kobe.
he's there already. It was Kobe. It's either Michael Jordan or
yeah.
Kobe. And he's there sweating because he's been up since 2:30.
Yeah.
And you're like,
yeah.
And so, but but did you think he didn't rest? No, he took a lot of periods of rest. It was conscious, chosen rest. And I think that's the difference. Are we scrolling unconsciously, resting, not really resting? Or am I consciously going, right, I've done these things, time to take my rest. It's going to look like whatever it looks like, and then I'm going to keep going.
That's a really good point, actually, because I mean, it's about, you can adjust the way you do things as well. So I scroll. I would spend some time on my phone, and the missus always says that my version of social media, because I don't have Instagram, I don't have Snap, TikTok, I don't know about those ones, but my version of it is like the news app. So like, I would often, I'm a bit of a news junkie in that I'm just aware of sort of current affairs and that sort of stuff. But actually, there's a very real reason as to why that's my poison. Because when I'm in meetings pitching, I can speak to current affairs and speak to... So one of my propositions relies quite heavily on just knowing what the political climate is, right?
Okay.
And so, yes, I'm resting. Yes, I'm scrolling like the rest of us. But actually, there's an intentionality behind it, because I'm doing it because now I can perform more optimally.
Yes.
When I'm doing my thing.
Yes, I think that intention is everything. Talking about change, as a technologist, an inventor, and someone who's up to date on current affairs, where do you think technology is taking us? From your perspective, what does the world look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
So it's such a convoluted question, because for me personally, because I'm one of the individuals in the world, I genuinely feel like I have a real stake in this, and not just from a situation that I'm affected by technology, but that I exist on the cutting edge of this, and I have an ability to affect it in ways that a lot of people don't necessarily. And that's not me sort of like, okay, I am blowing my horn a little bit, but it's such a privilege, right? So when I think about, okay, what is my vision for technology? Like I'm literally thinking about, okay, how do I want it to be? And I think one thing that I'm super, super big on is, mind the cliche, but there's a certain level of inclusion when it comes to technology. And I kind of explain this, like, we've had centuries of technology being dictated by sort of like, well, the wealthy, by those that have access and all that sort of stuff. And I am really, really big on this idea of democratization. So you might be aware that sort of our technology encourages, rather than things being captured from one perspective, collaboration and people including their voice in the telling of a story. That's kind of like the core premise of what we're doing. I'm like big on this idea of Afrofuturism as well, which I think is best described like sort of Wakanda Forever, and the idea of like people that were often excluded from sort of defining technology from themselves, being able to now say, actually, no, this is how we're going to do it. And this is a great example is this. I wonder what would Uber have been if it was created by a kid that lived under a bridge in Lagos. Like, what would Uber, what would it have looked like? And it's the ability to be able to define technology for yourself. We now have the tools that anyone can make an app. Like, anyone can create, if they've got real agency, you can just go out there and use AI to just achieve whatever goal that you want to achieve. And I just love the idea of technology not being in the hands of the few powerful, but actually everyone being able to leverage it in ways that they want, and their voice being heard through technology. I think that's the most appealing aspect of the age that we're in now.
That's really it's really optimistic perspective, which I love, because I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit.
Please
I want to hear what you say to this, and we're gonna wrap the conversation up with this point. Have you heard of the concept of techno-feudalism?
Fill me in, please.
Pre-capitalism as we know it now, we had feudalism. The people with the power were those that owned the land.
Yeah.
Now capitalism, the people are those with the money or the tools to make the money.
Yeah.
Techno-feudalism is, instead of physical land, it's online land. So one of my guests described this to me as the Zuck tax. If you want to be successful, what are the chances that your business doesn't need to be on Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp? And there's a good chance you have to pay for ads, or you pay in your time and they make money off of you by playing other ads. So every business has to go through this and pay some money to Mark Zuckerberg. This is the platform. Similar with the big five. So Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Meta. And to what extent will OpenAI be thrown in there? Will NVIDIA be thrown in there? Most of the time, people can't come and compete with these huge players because they just get bought up by them if they get too big, right? That's because VC. And that's how VC kind of works, is they want you to be bought by a Google or whatever. So most people can't break through this like iron wall of 5 large companies that are the platforms. And so they become so big and powerful that they can set the government agendas. They become so big and powerful that we have to adhere to them. And if they don't want to do something, they don't have to do it. So, and then they can collude with governments to make that worse. So to give you an example, this is the example that comes to my mind all the time. In the US, in the 70s, the Vietnam War ended because of protesting. I think the biggest protest, and citation needed, I could be wrong, it got to, I want to say 70,000 people. Maybe got into 6 figures. Again, citation needed, I don't remember exactly. And that was enough for the government to like lose their shit and go, okay, we have to end this war. Now, the protests of the atrocities happening in the Middle East have globally reached uncountable numbers. In individual cities like London alone, estimated up to 1,000,000 people at once. I think some estimates put them as low as 400,000. That's 4 to 10x the number that ended the Vietnam War. And it hasn't made a dent, or maybe it's made the smallest dent. What seems to have happened is these enormous platforms, they know everyone needs to use them. They have enormous lobbying power towards governments. Combine it with the military-industrial complex, which is at the forefront of technological development. So much of tech development is in the hands of those who just don't care what people say and do seem happy to use us. And governments are bending to their will. So that's techno-feudalism. That's the people with the power, those that own the land. The land just happens to be digital now. And therefore, democracy is going down the drain as well. So can we democratize tech if the people who own the tech don't care about us and democracy is going down the drain anyways? Where no matter how much we seem to organize ourselves, it doesn't work. Now that's not, I'm a little more optimistic than that personally, but that's the landscape that I'm seeing, that I also, despite being personally a bit more optimistic than that, I also find it challenging to argue with it. So what's your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's definitely true that the current social, economic, no, in fact, I'll call it what it is, capitalism is a massive impediment to at least my vision of the technological future. But I do have some hope, though. Remember the point I made before around how the top 10 companies today are not the top 10 companies 10 years ago. But in 10 years, it's going to change again. Like, change is life. We've made that point here. So there is always going to be an evolution. And I think the capacity for human beings to create new things, like, dictates that there will always be an evolving and a changing of the guard. NVIDIA that you mentioned now were not the NVIDIA you know today 3 years ago. Like, and I don't want the number 2, number 3 now, like some absolutely
They
crazy.
might have gotten to number 1, maybe just 2 behind
Right.
Tesla or something.
You know, I mean, they were like I mean, it was a good company. You know, if you made computers and stuff like that, you would have heard of them. Most people hadn't, right? And I think it's testament to the fact that there is always there will always be an opportunity for people with agency, people that are purpose driven, to play at a certain level and get themselves in a room where they can start to affect change. I think what's changed now, and the reason why I'm super optimistic, is because some of the tools that are in the choke codes of these major companies, some of those tools are empowering people to do things that they just wouldn't have been able to do before. And as somebody who, like, I've got patents to my name, right? Like I've come into this world and created something that I didn't actually create it, but I was at least gifted an idea of something that never existed. For me, represents an endless possibility for disruption. Endless possibility. And yes, disruption is difficult. Disruption is hard. You're always going to meet resistance at a governmental, at a business level. But I sort of maintain my optimism in the ability for the human race to create, to disrupt, and to do new things despite all of the challenges. If it was easy,
it would have happened by now.
Do you know what I mean, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, maintain my optimism.
The way I frame it is, short term, I think things are going to get more challenging. Long term, I think they're going to improve. It's just a question of how long and what's the pain that's going to happen on the way.
Yeah.
So I'm short term, pessimistically realistic. Long term, optimistically realistic.
Yeah. I think I look at what I'm working on as well, and this isn't just the public things. I think of the things I've got on my plate, and I have to believe there's a place in the world for some of this disruption. Otherwise, I won't be doing what I'm doing.
Yeah,
I have to believe there's a route to success and an impact. Otherwise, like, what am I doing there?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a reason for everything, then there's a reason you're doing the things now, even if things don't work out, right? When that's what failing forward is.
It's true. Very true.
There's a reason for it, even if I don't know 100% what that reason is, or maybe I do, or I think I know. And anyway, I feel like we could talk about this forever. I need to bring us home. Ando, I've got a closing question I ask everyone who comes on the show. The show is called Lost in Searching, and so I'd love to know, what is the biggest question in your life that you are still searching for the answer to right now?
I feel like I should have really been prepared for this question. What is the biggest question in my life that I am searching for right now? Oh, I'm going to need a while to think about this one.
Most guests do, it's okay. I tend to catch people off guard with this one.
Yeah. No, that's cliche. I'm not saying that.
You can say whatever comes to mind.
It is a little bit cliche, but I'm always asking the question, how can I? And it's more complicated than how can I do more. It's more a case of what do I need to do now to empower people to have more impact? So this idea of, it's not about me, it's bigger than me. And the way to look at impact, at least exponentially, is my job on this earth is to empower people to want to empower people that empower people. And go on and empower people. And I think I'm always looking at that sort of like cascading effect, right? Like in my company, I'm not like leading, individuals to an end goal. I'm actually trying to lead leaders, so many of whom are not going to be with me forever. Shock horror. They're going to go on and do other things, and they're going to have an impact on people in the similar way that other people have had an impact on me. And I think I'm always asking myself that question, and I'm always searching at like can I empower people better? Can I influence and inspire people to be more than themselves, or to think of themselves as more than themselves?
And we have that concept in business of, if one person brings in 3 people and each of those 1 people brings in 3 more people, a few of 2 or 3 things later, you've got 27 customers for the one you put effort into.
It's insane.
And I wonder if that's it. I guess what's the answer you've got so far, right? If the question is, can I? Well, I think you definitely can. It's how can I? Maybe is the question. Do you have a semblance of an answer so far?
Yeah, semblance. It's. I try to stay tapped in spiritually. I think I touched on that whole idea of sort of creativity, but like for me, the creativity isn't my own. I don't think everything I've achieved right now I've achieved because somebody set me up to achieve this. And I think I try to stay tapped into to God on those things. And yeah, it's a huge part of me. I don't know if that's quite come across, but yeah, that's where my answers come from. And I stay in that place of seeking. I stay continuously in that place of like reaching for the but what's next? This thing I'm doing right now, is that even right? And I'm always reaching for that clarity and for that answer.
Yeah. I think all the resources are within us to answer these questions. We have the intuition, we have the pull, we have the drive. If, I don't identify as religious myself. I do feel quite spiritually connected. And if that's what that is the connection to something greater than yourself, the perspective I've come to adopt is that that's potentially, at least in part, what our intuition is. It's a pull towards more that is meant for us, and we can listen or we can ignore. So listening to oneself is as much of a skill as listening to someone else.
I think you're right.
So maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's part of the answer. And look, man, I appreciate you so much because you do that very effectively. You listen very effectively. You give very openly. I appreciate you for not just coming on the show, also for the kind of person you show up as. Like you said, like, you're very intelligent, you're very tapped in, you know lots of things, and you use it very humbly to just give. And something I was going to say earlier that we didn't get to touch on is, like, that's where the word current comes from. Is the word current, the Latin root of the word current is curare, which means to flow to. And so therefore everything you receive, such as currency, must be in flow, right? So everything must flow from and to and be in a constant state of motion, flow, and therefore giving. Everything that you give, I know you will receive, and in doing so, you will give more. That's the kind of person you are, and it's so inspiring. So I appreciate you as a person. I appreciate you in my life, and I appreciate you for sharing so much with us today.
Thank you for your time, man. Had fun.
Alrighty, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I hope you found it valuable. We've reached a number of really important milestones on this show already. It's only been a couple of months, but I'm so grateful to those of you who not only subscribe, but also who listen this far along, who leave the comments on posts, or who give me really powerful, beautiful messages in response. It's been a humbling journey, and there is so much more to come. If there's something about this episode and the question that we answered, or any of the learnings that you took away that you want to make sure someone else you know understands themselves, then please do share this episode with them, along with your reflections, teaching other people something that you learned, passing the information on, or even just writing it down for yourself. All help you retain the answers to this, and any inspiration it gave you even more. That's the purpose of all this, is to give you as much positive, powerful, impactful results as possible on your journey to developing your own inner leader from so many different dimensions, not just the one we've talked about today. So thank you so much for being here, sending lots of love, and here's to your success.